Hello, this is Max Drake. I want to talk about smart homes and return on investment. Um, you see a lot of people and they get lots of nice toys, but you don't tend to see about the cost and benefits of those. So, the first part of this is I want to talk about the situation with my daughter. She ended up, uh, she's got a plant business, and the plants are inside a greenhouse. She's got two big tanks, 1 meter cubed, of water that they add fertilizer to. That all gets nicely mixed up, and once a day it gets pumped out to the plants. So they got that, and that's already automated. Another thing that's come on since is that they need to go and measure the pH of that water to see that it's in within a specific range prior to pumping it out to the plants. So that's fine during the day. They can actually just set an alarm on the things, and while they're working around the place doing it, they just need to go and do that check, and off it goes when they're there. But on the weekend, somebody's got to specifically come in to do just that. So even if everything else is all set up, somebody still needs to come in and do it. So from the point, I actually did just a cost analysis of just costs for things like that. So there's 52 weeks in the year. There's two weekend days in for every week. So there's 104 weekend days per year that this needs to be done. There's three people, so each person has to allow for 35 days on their weekends over the year to actually come in and do this little exercise. If we say the hourly rate is something like $23 an hour, sort of like we're getting near minimum wage, and the time on the in the greenhouse per day is about half an hour. So what they need to do is they need to turn the pumps on, mix the pumps. They then need to check the pH levels after about 2 minutes just to make sure that the water's fertilizer nicely mixed. They can get the pH, and then they can read whether it's up or down, and then they need to up dose, so they need to add a little bit of acidity or add a bit of alkali, and then let it mix a bit, recheck with the pH again just to see what it reads, and then when it's in the range where they're comfortable with it, then they say fine. As long as that's done within an hour of when they actually do the irrigation, they know that the pH is right and it's not going to harm the plants, or it's the most benefit for the plants. So again, based on that, a couple of them of the people need to travel half an hour to get there to get to the greenhouses, and then half an hour to get back home. So each weekend day, that person, two of them, one of them lives just beside, so it only takes them 5 minutes to walk up the road. So these two take 1.5 hours, but they've got to take each weekend, either Saturday or Sunday, and doing that, they've got to do it 35 days in the year. It's going to cost $23 per hour, and so it adds up to about $1,200 for these two, and $400. So a total of about $27,000 if they split it equally, about $2,800 per year. Now, if it's automated, somebody needs to go onto an app. They need to press a couple of buttons on two smart plugs to turn the pumps on, so the pumps can run for about 20 minutes, and they're just running all the time. Then they actually just need to read the pH readings on the two tanks, and then once that is settled down, maybe after 2 minutes or 3 minutes after the pumps have been running, they can actually get a steady pH reading, and then they say, right, I need to up dose or down dose. So they can go to another app inside of Tuya, and then each of them have got an up dosing pump and a down dosing, and they have an inching thing. So it means they'll run for maybe 30 seconds. And so each pump will run for 30 seconds. So they can push concentrated acid in or concentrated alkali in to modify the pH level of things. So they can just do the inching devices, and they say, oh, it's that much, I need to press that twice, so it adds a little dose of acid, and it does it the other way, or alkali. So they need to check the two tanks, and then once that's it, they're done. So if we say that's taken half an hour and they need to do that 104 days of the week, they can be anywhere in the world, and as long as they've got a Wi-Fi connection, and as long as they're attached to the internet, so they can actually have their mobile data or whatever, and it's going to be $23. So that's going to cost $1,200 instead of $2,800. So the difference, the savings per annum, is about $1,600. Now, the equipment that we ended up buying, initially the only equipment for actually doing the dosing was most probably in the region of $350 to $400, if that. But we ended up getting a whole load of these sensors here, which is the moisture sensor all the way through. So these can be put into every line of plants, not into every plant pot, but into each line if they're going out all over the greenhouse, so they can measure the moisture content of those plants, or one of the plants in that row, so that you know at the irrigation time that you'll see that all of them, the moisture level will jump up because they've suddenly been irrigated, so that you know that the liquid is going into all of the different parts of where they do. So it's a sort of like a backup. Like if you were going there, you'd turn the pumps on, or you'd do the pH, and then you'd maybe stick around to see that the irrigation, you just check to see that all the irrigation lines. So these are actually acting as a second level checking to see that all the lines are actually getting the irrigation through, and they have a sensor that if the soil moisture level gets below a certain thing, they set an alarm, and it's most probably 10% above what would be a critical thing for the plants. And then the other thing that we ended up doing was we ended up with a couple of sensors, sonars, on the top of the tanks, so that you can measure how much liquid's in the tank. So if you did something and the sensors were still a little bit dry, like it was middle of summer or something like that, and you felt that they needed another boost or another level of irrigation, you could give them another boost of irrigation. This is on a different automated system, so that they were getting more moisture, and you could check to see that there was enough liquid for the next day as well, so that you knew you didn't have to worry. So these are sort of checks and balances added on. So in the end, that system so far has cost about $1,000. So the first year's savings is about $600. But every year after that, the savings is going to be about $1,600. So from the point of view of a return on investment, this is definitely of good value. It's saving you money, and once you put it into place, there's the initial upfront cost that you've got to do to set it up. But once it's in place, it's a no-brainer. The other one, so from a point of view of numbers, yes, you spend this money and you make money because you're not spending on all of these other things. The second one is really from a subjective point of view. From the point of view of the staff, much more quality of life. From the point of view of they know somebody doesn't have to go in at mid-morning to actually do all those checks. Now, they may want to go in for something else, but they're not forced to actually go in from that point of view. So therefore, all of the staff have more freedom. They only need to work 5 days a week, and then the other days, it's not a necessity that they go in. So to a certain extent, so from a point of view of having more happy staff, that's a nice thing. There's no bickering about who has to go on the weekend or all this of stuff. It gives people more freedom. The other thing is, somebody may go away for a holiday, and they say, oh, well, can you actually do that half an hour job that we need to do? So because it's an app, they can share it in amongst themselves, and they can be out at coffee, and they suddenly saying, look, I've just got to sit over here for 10 minutes or half an hour and just do this thing here. Or so it doesn't actually break up their day that much long in a way. They can go out to a concert or they can go somewhere else. As long as that's done within a certain period of time, it meets their needs. They don't actually have to go specifically to a location to do it. So this one, return on investment and also subjective good qualities. When I look at this, I suddenly say, well, okay, then for my smart home here, this is when it gets a bit embarrassing. So on the spend for that, here's all of the spend of all of the items that I bought. Anything in the reddish is stuff that was invested into my daughter's project. Anything in white or not red is stuff that I've actually spent myself. So overall, it's broken down into two parts. The lower one, the 546, has been a lot of the microprocessors and a lot of the sensors and the things that I've been exploring through that. On this side here, these are all the pre-made sensors like this thing here and anything ancillary to do with those. So I spent about $840 for $15 to get this smart home like here. So basically I've invested in some bulbs, in some plugs, in some curtains, in the smart switch here, in some smart meters here, and in a lot of sensors, temperature and humidity sensors at this point in time. I've also started to do some lux meters, sorry, not lux meters, PIR sensors to actually trigger things off, and I've also invested in a couple of smart switches, but I've yet to get them to play with them. So how do I see what my return ROI is on this? So all I can do is I can go into my electricity. Now my electricity is done by spot pricing. So therefore, if the price of electricity at this point, the spot price is $254 per megawatt hour, then therefore I will pay 25.4 cents for that 1 kilowatt during that period there, plus other things on top of that. So what are those other things on top of that? So I pay per watt it actually sits. So if I'd actually paid at this point in time, this is when it hit peak, and for some known reason this just went mad. At 7 o'clock this went up to $5,000 per megawatt hour, which is roughly $5 for a kilowatt hour. So if I've used electricity here between 7 and 8:30, it would, if I used 1 kilowatt, it would have cost me $5 for that 1 kilowatt, whereas the same thing would have cost me 25 cents. So roughly 20 times as much if I'd have been unjudicious. As it is, I usually end up setting my hot water to heat in the middle of the night. So a lot of that, this will drop down to maybe 100. So instead of paying 25 cents, I'm actually only paying maybe 15 cents or 17 cents per kilowatt for heating up my water. So my water, what I actually found when I was actually researching these are my electricity bills all the time, what I actually found was that I use about a kilowatt of water, I use about an hour's worth of hot water a day, which roughly ends up about 3 kilowatts, because that's what the element heating strength is there. And that's about 2/3 of my daily electricity use. The other one is just for cooking, mainly, and a couple of lights. So if I can actually put 2/3 of my electricity and know that I can get it at the cheapest price for that day, that's definitely going to reduce the price of my thing. Now, when I actually pay my electricity, the actual electricity purchase, here's a demonstration on this one, my electricity purchase through here, $3.56. This is for the 71 kilowatts that I use. So if I did 71 kilowatts at 20 cents a kilowatt or whatever, it comes into that. I then get distribution charges. Now you can see the distribution charges are almost double what the actual kilowatt charge was. Then I get administration charges. I get an EA electricity levy, and then I pay GST on that, and then that all adds up to the total. So there's all these extra charges on your base rate. So if there's a way, and once you get to a low point, you still pay quite high prices in the other areas. So what I did was I suddenly said, so I've been monitoring this for about 2 years now, and every time I get a bill, I add this information in there. So what I ended up doing, I said, well, okay, then I put this in about January, the Wi-Fi switch. So from the beginning of January through to the end of April, so that's 4 months, I looked at how much electricity I used in that 4 months and how much I paid. So if in 2023, I used 885 kilowatts and I paid a total cost of about 282. From January to April 2024, I used about 667 kilowatts, which is about 3/4 the amount that I used the year before for the same period. and it cost me more. It cost me 329 because prices have gone up. So I've used 2/3, but it's cost me, what's that cost? Equals that divided by that. It's cost me about 70% more in price. So what I ended up doing was I suddenly said, okay then, so what's my price per kilowatt hour? So it ends up, last year I was paying 32 cents a kilowatt hour. This year I'm paying 49 cents per kilowatt hour. So if I multiply 49 cents by the amount of kilowatt hours I used before, it would have cost me, if I was to compare what my power usage then to my power usage now with the same rate, it would have cost me $437. So therefore my saving on what I actually paid would be about $107. So that's for a 4-month period. So if we multiply that by 3 for a whole year, then I'd make a savings of about $323. So if I come back into here, this one switch has saved me about $323. So there's a benefit for some of the things, but that's just that one device. And when I initially did this, I got the power meter, I got 1, 2, 3 bulbs, and I also got a switch. But this one switch is the one, so that cost me about 30 plus it was installation as well. 30, I think the Wi-Fi switch cost about $30, and then there was installation. But overall, and then since then, I think I've got a reasonably measurable saving of about $300 a year, or $330 a year. That's fine for that device, but what about the rest of them? So far, I've invested in the little smart switches and stuff like that, in my spend, about $800. So if I've saved about $300, that means about $500 I've over-invested. Where can I get that justification? From the point of view of the microprocessors, and a lot of these I've been trying to do things such that I can maybe enhance and help my daughter out with some things. So I was sort of stubbornly trying to do some sensors and things there, although there's a couple I want to use in my house. I want to create a lux measure to do some things and stuff. I've had a total failure on this so far. I've had no device where I suddenly thought that in a setup that I want. I've got my rain meter now that keeps on dropping out, but if I plug that into a USB at some point, I think I could get that to be reliable such that I could actually use that, and that particular the rain bucket meter is something that I want to do for my daughter. But nearly all the sensors that I've been doing, so I can put down a lot of this investment as total R&D, and that I've had quite a lot of learning out of the microprocessors, but as such there's been no return on investment. That has just been a waste of money from that point of view. From my own personal learning, it's actually been quite educational, but I've had no success out of it. From these ones here of investing $800 in these sensors and things that I've actually done, I've been able to show measurable savings about 325. So that's okay. So I've spent $500 and I've got no measurable things out of that, if I was trying to look at this as a return on an investment. Now, one of the things is I bought a whole lot of sensors. Now, the sensors, a lot of the temperature sensors and things like that, they're more something of an interest to me as a designer, as an architect and as a building services designer, is that I can actually get real-time data off my house so that I can actually start looking at opportunities. Now, one of the opportunities that I can actually see with my sensors through here is when I actually look here. So this is the sensors that are doing the reading. So these two at the bottom are outside sensors, so they're the front and the back door. These ones at the top, I'm just going to turn a couple off. Back porch I'll turn off, and dining room I'll turn off, and bedroom 3 I do want to. So the bedroom 3 and the attic space, sort of at this point here, it heats up to 23 degrees, and my living room space is 19 degrees. So there's a 4 degrees difference through there. So if we just go through back to the plan, This is the southeast corner, so the coldest place in the house. So I'm in the southern hemisphere, so the sun go, rises in the east and goes round to the west, so it's shining on the north side. This room here, this back room here, which is just a bedroom that I use as a workroom for some things and storage, it's not really used, but this gets very, very warm. But this room here has fantastic views. So I'd rather sit in this room and watch all the world go by, because I've got a sea view and I can see the airport, and I can see some burbs and stuff like that, and I see ships going out. So it's a lovely place to be, but it's the coldest room in the house. And this one here gets, so if we just go back to that history, this one here, I'll just turn him off and turn him back on again, that's my living room one. So what I can actually do is that I can take heat from my attic space or from my end bedroom and transfer it across. So I can take free heat, and using a fan I can take heat from this room and push it into this room. Anything on this side is cold, anything on this side here is warm. So I can actually take stuff from my attic and push it into the living room when that's there. Now it will cost me a fan and most probably a non-return damper to make sure the air only flows one way. It flows in from here, because there's times when suddenly the attic space in the middle of a clear night gets very cold and the living room is warmer, so that we don't want to end up causing a reverse siphon effect and actually drawing warm air from the living room up into the attic space. So getting this data through here, I can start doing some modelling. Now these are particularly good at the moment because it's nice sunny days, but I can actually say if there's a 2-degree temperature difference, turn on a smart switch which will turn on the fan, which will actually blow air from the attic space down. So I'd have to invest in some things, but there's an opportunity of actually getting warmer air for free for heating, so I don't have to use the smart switches. So there is an opportunity there. So this sensor's actually giving me a lot of information, and it's giving me data so I can actually analyze something and do. And a lot of the sensors were reasonably cheap, like they were $4 or $5 for some of these sensors, so definitely good value. The smart switches are quite good from the point of view of I can actually plug a heater into here, and I can actually suddenly say, well, when's the peak periods? So I'll heat a room up when it's non-peak. So I've added heating to spaces when at non-peak times, so I can warm up rooms prior to using them, so that when I go in there they're comfortable. And then when it's a more expensive period, not. This is something which comes in a bit twisty. So from the point of view of return on investment, I don't. And this is another thing I just want to stand back and look at here, from the point of I've invested $800, so about $1,400 at this point in time to do this. So the things that I'm exploring and learning. And from a designer's point of view, I think it's useful information. I'll go into that a little bit more. But I just want to stand across and suddenly saying, well, I've spent on a lot of these gadgets, like some of them definitely a good return on investment. Some of the other ones I can get pretty lights. They can do different colors, and then I can increase and reduce the brightness for them. Now, how much extra has that added to my quality of life? Not necessarily that much. And I'm suddenly thinking, but I could actually go and have a holiday in Fiji for about, or two people could go for about 3,400 or something like that. There's still extra stuff on top, but not necessarily. This is in the region of maybe half the cost, but I can suddenly say, oh, yeah, so 26, 27, but it's sort of maybe a third of the price. So instead of actually spending this, which would maybe some of the things are qualitative from the point of view of actually being able to dim bulbs and trigger things and do some other stuff, increases the quality of life a little bit. Maybe if I got a robot vacuum or something like that, that would actually increase some of my thing. It wouldn't that much. I actually have the time to spend to be able to do that. But somebody who has a busy life, a robot vacuum maybe just takes away that chore so that they actually save some time that they can actually relax or do some other things. So they're not actually suddenly doing something they don't want to do, but they have to do just to maintain a certain quality of life. So there's things of, do I invest in something which there's no real return to, but that's an increment that I get every day. It's something that just makes my life just a little bit easier. Or do I suddenly thinking, no, it's of no consequence, I'd rather go and have a Packageology for a week. So these are the sorts of things that you balance up. Now, when I was actually watching a lot of the videos of people doing things, they got these wow things that do all sorts of fancy stuff, and their lights are doing all sorts of jazzy things, and they've gone through their house, they've got an electrician in there, they've re-cabled all of the things so that they can have smart switches everywhere, and they have this view that, a smart home should be seamless, but then suddenly they're paying an awful lot of money for something of which they just needed to go up and just press a button for. So what are all these extra enhancements, and are they a justifiable thing? So I think there's something of, how do you measure the improvement in your life? Now, at this point in time, with Home Assistant and with some of the other things, I find it's a bit, it's taken a lot of learning to actually do things. It's not that it's not that seamless, it's not that simple, lots of fiddle factor. So, and the other thing which I've noticed on a lot of the YouTube videos, only one woman seemed to be very knowledgeable about Home Assistant and stuff like that. Nearly all the other ones are guys. We love fiddling with things. We're just geeky toots. But I haven't seen that much which actually justifies what you do. And if you justify on the level of, it's just fun to do and I'm prepared to spend my money, that's fine. There's that's a reason for it. But for things that just seamlessly fit into the house and allow to do those, I question it. Now, also as a designer, you see here, this thing here has just suddenly dropped off, and I don't know why it's dropped off. And then suddenly my power keeps on dropping off. Now it's running all the time, so it's a bit touchy, some of these things, I do find. And a lot of these ones here are some of my ESP. So these are my microprocessors that keep on flashing up and things. So I find some of the things are not quite as reliable as stuff. So now I bought the bottom of the range sort of gadgets that I've been buying. So and a lot of them are not very well spec'd, as far as you don't get that much information. It's really just suck it and see and trial and error. But along with these, because I'm actually working with an existing building, I want a minimum of intrusion into it. So I bought a lot of Zigbee type devices, and so that they can be battery operated. Now, in consequence to that, I've suddenly gone and purchased a whole lot of rechargeable batteries and battery chargers and things like that, so that when these start failing, I'm not forever going out and purchasing extra batteries to do this. Again, another thing with the setup that we're looking at here, it wasn't something that I had to begin with, and so my Wi-Fi mesh was fantastic for my computers and stuff that I was doing, but as soon as I ended up with the smart home, I suddenly had to go back to a very clear 2.4 gigahertz channel. So I had to use my old router and cable that up. Then I had to relocate that. Then I ended up having to get an old extender, and in fact I was having problems with the extender, and I went and purchased another one, and then it came right. So I've got another extender that I purchased through there. With the Zigbee hub, I initially had the Zigbee here. It didn't quite extend to here, and in fact I've still got a bit of a problem with one of my bulbs in the area. My sensor works through here, but the bulb doesn't seem to, and that's a Bluetooth bulb that I've got, and it's just not connecting to my new Zigbee hub that I purchased. So I've ended up buying a lot of other things just because the other thing didn't quite meet the needs that I actually had before. So it's sort of, to make it that bit of an improvement, you've had to buy other things just to try and get the same consistency across the building all the way through. And this is where I've seen people, they're rewiring up their house, or they rewired up all of their security and Ethernet cables all the way through and things like that. So having electricians and stuff coming in and ripping your house apart. Now, if you're doing a refurb, you're going into the house and you had played and tinkered with some of these things before, and then you were coming into a new house, you're suddenly thinking, it's worth that extra investment. I've got these people on site, I will increase their budget by 50% or 20% for this particular sub-trade to actually justify that, and then the overall build is going to add another 5% or 6% overall. It's worth planning for. Because you can see long-term, you're future-proofing the building. With a lot of this, I can't see. Now, another area that I can see something from my point of view as a learning as an architect and as a building services designer, being able to actually get a whole lot of information. So if I was actually doing somebody else's house now and doing an extension, I'd most probably say, look, we're not going to be doing anything for a while. I'd like to bung a whole lot of sensors in there just to get a feel for just how the existing building performs, so that we can start analysing how we can actually enhance it and make it better. So we can actually, pull raw data out of the thing. But this is only as a designer. From the point of view of, aged care or young infants and children through an area, if I was into sort of play areas and things, some of these things would be really useful. Now, another thing that I just want to draw your attention to, all of my things are tend to do environmental, so lighting, power, curtains and light and stuff like that, switches and stuff, and doing heating. So I haven't got anything to do with security. Now, after working in third world or working in overseas as a volunteer and things like that, and doing stuff and being in secure compounds and the paranoia that goes with all of that, it ends up creating this us and them and things. I see, how do you justify a lot of security things? How many times have you been robbed? Will it actually stop something from being robbed, and do you save some massive amount? Is your insurance reduced? By having the security systems and stuff in there, if you've invested in that, do you still invest in insurance? Suddenly saying, no, I've got all the security in place. I know when a door's going to be opened or a window's going to be opened, and I can check on all of those. So door locks, door switches, window switches, security cameras, all of that. I'm not investing in. I'm not really interested in it, and I can't see how you justify that return on investment for those sorts of things. And I think there was, I think it was Bowling for Columbine or something like that. It's talking about, the gun attitude in the States compared to the gun attitude in Canada, and the casualness of the Canadians of how they treated their neighbours compared to how the suspicion that some of the other ones, the Americans, do. And overall, it's how you wish to approach these. Bad things going to happen in life, but having invested in lots of security cameras, I can't really see that it's going to improve that much. And it also helps, the state of being supervised by everything all the time. So I'm really struggling with how you measure whether it's worthwhile. Do they fit in seamlessly? A lot of the devices now, there's some seriously smart stuff out there, and some of the devices I think are well worth having. But I don't know what measure you use to actually say, was that of value, and has that enhanced my life? So maybe this is the first one of a few videos that I need to do on this particular subject. So anyway, I hope you found that of interest. If you did, please give a thumbs up. If not, op panyaha.